Oh, this is gonna be crazy. That was great. Alright, hello everyone and welcome today to another episode of SpraynPray1000's Verdict. I am SpraynPray1000 and today we are going to talk about a pretty important game actually in my gaming history. Now this is a game that I have played before. Today we're going to talk about Tales of Symphonia. This is a game that way back in, I believe, 2006 or summer 2007, I played the original version of this game for the GameCube, and I enjoyed it a lot. It definitely was one of the first real JRPGs that I played in my lifetime, and then after this it paved the way for me to play tons more JRPGs, and this was one of the founding 3 Japanese role-playing games that I did play when I was I'd say a teen, yeah, about a teen. The other 2 being Final Fantasy III and Final Fantasy Tactics Advance. So, I don't even remember. You're gonna have to forgive me. I did not do a lot of research prior to me starting this, but around, I'd like to say February of this year, Namco Bandai decided to re-release Tales of Symphonia and its sequel, Tales of Symphonia Dawn of the New World, for the PS3 as part of the Tales of Symphonia HD Chronicles collection thing. And today I'm only going to talk about Tales of Symphonia. Now you have to understand, a lot of times when I reviewed a lot of these HD collections, for the most part I've played both of the games in the collection first and then done my verdict. This time around, unfortunately, guys, I'm going to have to kind of bend that rule a little bit, and I'm going to have to review these games separately just because of the fact that Tales of Symphonia is an extremely long game, okay? Tales of Symphonia took me, I believe, 142 videos. It's one of the longest playthroughs I've ever done. It's right up there with Tales of Graces and Tales of Xillia in the 140s. In fact, they're all about the same length, believe it or not. And I'm just going to have to review the first game first because I really do not have the disk drive space to hold both a playthrough of Tales of Symphonia and Tales of Symphonia Dawn of the New World on the same disk drive. And also, I'm not ready to play Tales Dawn of the New World yet. In fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to play Tales of Symphonia and Final Fantasy X HD first. I already started Final Fantasy X. I'm not even close to being done with it, though. But I did start it before I left for my vacation, and that's going to be continuing. I'll do a verdict on that. And in a similar situation, Final Fantasy X was also re-released by Square Enix, however, along with its sequel. So I'm going to review the game separately. This is going to be episode 36. I don't know what's going to come after this. You know, it might be Watch Dogs, it might be Final Fantasy III PC, which is... It's ironic that Final Fantasy III is also a pretty important game because it's getting re-released tomorrow for the PC, but I digress. Basically, all you need to know is that I'm going to be reviewing these games separately. Okay? So, Tales of Symphonia is a Japanese role-playing game, and unlike Final Fantasy, unlike a lot of these other, you know, more turn-based JRPGs, and I'm going to use that term a lot, JRPG, because that is how we describe them, at least in America, Tales games typically revolve around character building, relationship building with other characters, and especially in combat, you have a big degree of real-time battling. So, for example, in most JRPGs, you wait your turn, or a lot of them now use the active time feature where a character's speed determines how quickly they can act, and a lot of other things along those lines. And Final Fantasy has definitely been around the bush a lot with that. But Tales games have always been about real-time battling, using attacks and whatnot. And if you just watch, you know, just one fight in a Final Fantasy game and then one fight from a Tales game, you can immediately see the difference. It's a lot more free-flowing. The combat is meant to feel a lot more alive and involved than just simply giving commands and, just watching characters do their thing. In a Tales game, basically you control one character, and now there is multiplayer where multiple people can all control different characters, but for the most part, I play Tales games solo. I have tried playing the multiplayer before, and it wasn't that fun, for a lot of people who get stuck with the less melee-oriented characters. And you can actually opt to not control any character. You can set all the characters to be computer controlled, and that's a viable strategy. But obviously, having a human control a character is, in many ways, a lot better than having a computer control it. So, what is Tales of Symphonia? Tales of Symphonia, story-wise, is a game featuring 3 young kids. Well, I'd say 3 teens or so. As one of them is the Chosen, basically a figure who has a lot of religious backing and a lot of religious importance in their world, and how she has to undergo a journey to basically stop the world from being destroyed. And by doing so, she will replenish the world and make it new again. So basically, it's a cycle of renewal. Additionally, the other 2 friends are her close friends, and they want to see her succeed. And from there, the plot just really, really takes off. It's really kind of a little slow at first to kind of build it up, but then after a certain point, the plot really gets moving. And like all other Tales games, along the way, there's going to be a lot of different plot twists that you encounter that really change the way you can look at the game on your first playthrough. There's going to be a lot of different things that occur. A lot of different characters you meet, everyone all intertwined in this big story. It's unlike a lot of other JRPGs where it kind of just feels like some characters are just along for the ride just because they happen to know 1 or 2 people. In Tales of Symphonia, a lot of these characters, they were basically intertwined. It's almost like a sense of fate that they all came together and the events of the story happened. They're all important. Each one of them sort of has ties to the other. And by I'm talking about the party members and the villains and stuff like that. And I really try not to spoil too much of the story here. I'm giving a very, very bland outline because this game, I will say, has probably one of the better stories I've ever seen in a game. It's really, really in depth. And when I first played it, 7 years ago or so, it blew my mind away that this was in a game. And obviously now at this point, it's game, pretty much every game has had something like this, so it's not that special anymore. But there's definitely an essence of a good story and great storytelling that exists in Tales of Symphonia. And like all other Tales games, there's skits that can be added to, flesh out characters, give titles for characters, really elaborate more on finer details of the story, and such, and more on that. And basically the same thing that they do in a lot of Tales games. Each character really feels like they're somewhat well written. Well, I wouldn't say somewhat, but at least decently well written. And I think that if you really are in it for the story, you're probably going to enjoy it. Now, for gameplay-wise, as I said before, it's real-time battle. For the most part, the game kind of wants you to control one character. Like most Tales games typically do this. Typically, they want you to control only the main character of the actual game. They want you to control balance towards having a tanky character be the main character and be the main focus, and that's kind of why the main characters in all the Tales games are more melee oriented, because magic in Tales is, because it's real time, they can be interrupted, magic users, and it kind of gets a little boring when you play as magic users. So the main emphasis of the game is that you play as the tank. In this case, Lloyd Irving. All the characters, however, have a lot of different moves and a lot of different play styles. Some of them overlap. Some of them go completely in different directions. So, for example, Lloyd is more of he dual wields swords. He is more of a tanky guy. He has a lot of different spells. He has high HP. Well, by spells, I mean arts, which are the Tales version of spells, and basically they're his physical abilities. And comparing him to his best friend Genus, who only knows magic, really, it's a very different play style. You have Rain, who is a healer. You also have let's see, who else? We also have someone who fights with his feet predominantly, and you also have 2 characters that use spells and swords. Sort of a mix, like a magic knight kind of. So there's a lot of diversity amongst the characters, a lot of different things that they can do. One character summons monsters, but only when they're in over limit. And it's really interesting finding out what combo really works for you. You know, a lot of different variety of options are also available to you, such as unison attack, which allows you to unleash combo attacks with 2 or more characters, you know, on an enemy at once. You can interrupt enemy attacks. You can tie a massive combo into a unison attack to keep the combo going and finish it with a lot of damage. There's also over limit, which is in this game a little more primitive than some of its later incarnations. For example, over limit in this game is actually a hidden counter, and once a character surpasses the threshold, they automatically enter it, and it gives them immunity to knockback and stun. You know, they take less damage and stuff like that. Bosses can also use it, so you got to be careful for that. And yeah. Also, not to mention, this game has a lot of open world, a lot of side quests that you can do, a lot of titles you can get for the characters that will help increase their stats and level them up. There's a lot of different weapons, customization everywhere, and you know, sometimes there's costumes for different characters. There's also you can synthesize weapons, a monster bestiary to fill out. You know, a lot of this stuff is your typical fare for a JRPG, but a lot of it is, you know, exclusive to Tales, and definitely in this game, the variety of characters and the variety of things that you go and do make it very memorable. Now, this game is not without its flaws at all. Let's talk about what I don't like about this game, or some of the downsides to this game. For the most part, this game is pretty similar to its 2004 release incarnation. This game, as I said, has already been released. Tales of Symphonia was already released back in 2004, 2005, I believe. And for the most part, the HD collection continues to have a lot of the same problems because, again, it's a port. It's not a remake. They didn't change really anything. They just adapted it for the PS3, and they sold it that way. So, what do I not like about this game? What I don't like about this game, and by the way, you have to remember that this game is older than other Tales games, so a lot of other Tales games don't have these problems, but this game does have them. This game has a lot of restrictions in combat. So, for example, in combat, you cannot... in combat in Tales game, you are on basically a two-dimensional line with your opponent, and moving left or right moves you left and right. Up and down are used to either make change what attack you use, or up, when you hold it without pressing any buttons, makes you jump. So there's no real way to run freely around in 3 dimensions in this game, and a lot of times that actually can hurt you if you can't get away from an enemy's attack, or if you can't really position yourself in a good way. You know, and a lot of other later Tales games have already rectified this problem. They allow you to run in 3 dimensions, and then by holding a button, and then upon releasing it, you go back to 2 dimensions. But this game does not allow you to do that. This game traps you essentially on the same dimension, and the only way to go to another one is to target a different opponent. Now, the computer is not restricted by this rule. This rule only applies to the human player. But at the same time, it makes it very difficult in a lot of fights where, you know, your teammate might be blocking you, or you might want to run around and hit an enemy from the side or something, or an enemy or two might be trapping you in a corner, but because you're unable to run out one way that you can, you're basically stuck there and you have to figure something out. So yeah, a lot of times that does come into play and make it a little annoying. Now, the other thing that I don't like about this game is it breaks immersion a lot. In other Tales games, you know, voice acting is a lot more common, especially in the later Tales games, especially in Tales of Xillia, has a lot of voice acting. In fact, most of that game is voice acted. It's not text that you have to read out. Most of the game, I'd say maybe 70 to 80% of the game is voiced. In Symphonia, I'd say that maybe about 30 to 40% of the game is voiced. Maybe, I'd say that, yeah, about 30 to 40% of the game is voiced, and it's very awkward. So you'll have a very important cutscene happening, or a very important dialogue chain happening, and there'll be no voices. And then 5 seconds later, they'll load something, there'll be voices. And then you might think that, oh, okay, you know, both of these are pretty equal, you know, in their severity towards the story. But really, that's not the case. A lot of times, it kind of ends up like, okay, there's voice acting, you know, maybe for 5 minutes or so, and then it's back to you reading for 20 minutes, and it really kind of breaks immersion when you don't really... There's a presentation factor that's missing, and it's really, really For some people, it's not that big a deal. For others, it's kind of like, not, I wouldn't say the kiss of death, but for me, it kind of bothers me when you have, these great characters, the voice actors really feel like they really belong with the character. And then, it kind of breaks flow, it breaks immersion when you have to read for 10 minutes instead of, naturally listening to them and listening to the characters talk and breathe life into their character, instead of me or whatever voice you have in your head reading it out. Now, the other thing I want to say about this game is that the skits in this game are not voiced, like Vesperia, and also, I forget if the ones in Graces were voiced. I know in Xillia they were, but I don't know about in Graces, I forget. You're going to have to forgive me for this. But this game has no voice cutscene, or no voice skits, and normally that wouldn't be too big of a problem, but because there's no voice acting, I assume what happened during development is because there was no voice acting, they kind of had to assume how quickly someone was going to read these skits, the dialogue which appears on screen, which is pretty much the only way of understanding what's happening in them since there's no voice acting. It becomes very weird where sometimes you'll have a mini paragraph of text from one character, and then it'll zip by. You only have 5 seconds to read it. And it's just, sometimes it gives this weird feeling like there's no way anyone will be able to read that, let alone say it in that short of amount of time. And a lot of times, characters will have pauses and stuff, and it's just kind of, there's a feeling of presentation that is missing from there. And unfortunately, sometimes it kind of hurts the storytelling a little bit. And I don't know what to say besides, it's unfortunate, but at least, no other Tales games will probably ever have that problem. Now, I can understand why these cutscenes don't have a lot of voice acting. I can understand that because, this is a JRPG. Typically, Japanese role-playing games do not do well in America. They or internationally, they don't. However, the world of 2014 is very different from 2004. Tales of Xillia obviously being proof of that, that these games do have a lot of voice acting, and Namco Bandai is taking it seriously, which I do appreciate from them. Considering what happened, the past couple of years, I do appreciate that they do take those strides and make those efforts to have more voice acting in their cutscenes. And the other thing I will say is I do like the soundtrack of this game. I really do. I really do like the soundtrack. The graphics, however, you have to understand, are from GameCube era games. These are graphics that were good in the GameCube era. These are not PlayStation 3 graphics. Just so we're clear, this game is old. This game is 10 years old. It has some age to it. It shows it, but I think it wears it pretty well for the most part. The other thing, though, that I did just remember is that sometimes in combat, your AI teammates will act very robotic. So, for example, you'll begin to see a lot of patterns happen with a lot of the different characters that you aren't controlling. You'll basically see them at the start of the battle, run in, do a couple of attacks, run out, stand there for a second, wait, I guess, so the game can process and pick what it has to do next. Then they run in, do whatever they need to do, run out, and that's pretty much it. There's no really kind of coordination with you, the player, a lot of the time. So a lot of times combat is kind of your own solo thing. 3 guys or whatever, how many tanks you have, run in, do their thing. Magic users cast magic. Healers heal, etc., etc. And I won't say it's horrible. I won't say it ruins the game, but again, it is a little blocky. As I just said, the game has a little bit of age to it. Well, a decade of age to it, and you just got to be mindful of that when you go in and play this game. So, what would I give Tales of Symphonia? Surprisingly, how fondly I talk about this game and how fondly I love this game. It does have some flaws. It is not the perfect game. It is not the best. It's not all around a perfect. However, it is still a good JRPG experience that I recommend that if you are a fan of Tales games, you definitely should play it. If you've never played a Tales game and you want to play an older style RPG, this is the game you should jump right into. I will give Tales of Symphonia HD, and now just remember, this is only for the first game. I have not played Dawn of the New World for PS3 yet. So this is just for Tales of Symphonia HD for PS3. I will give it an 86 out of 100. It is well-rounded. It does what it needs to do. It's very fulfilling, but it does have some flaws that you should be aware of. And Definitely, you should be careful if you're jumping in and expecting Zillia kind of work. You need to understand that this game is not Zillia. It is not the same as it, and it's different, and you need to be mindful of that. So that's going to conclude for this episode. I'm SpraynPray1000. You know, it was a blast playing this game. I haven't played it in so long. You know, almost 5 years or so, 6 years, however many years, 7 years, and I'm really happy that I got to play it. You know, PlayStation 3, GameCube, rain or shine, it was a blast, and I really hope you guys pick it up or you enjoy it, and you know, just have fun with it. You know what I mean? And thank you, Namco Bandai, for re-releasing this game. You know, let's hopefully see that you keep this going. And thank you guys, and I'll see you later.